What's going on, everyone? My name is James Hackney. I'm the Big 12 correspondent for Intermat, and I thought it would be fun to do a bit of a video breakdown of the brackets and talk about some stuff involving seeds, where guys got where they were, some matches to look out for, and then some guys that probably aren't as familiar to everyone on the national stage. I think the Big 12, second most automatic qualifying spots, but I think there's a couple weights where on paper, it feels like they would have more. And so I think that there's a lot of guys that there's good depth and some guys to look out for and some matches that to really pay close attention to. I'll try not to be too long winded. I like the details. I like getting into the sleepers, the guys no one's heard of that might go on a run or might get an upset. But like I said, I'll try to keep this relatively short. Um, so starting at 125 pounds, craziest weight class in the country, doesn't change for the Big 12. You got Noah Certain at the 1 seed, despite recently having a loss to the 2 seed Troy Spratley. Troy Spratley, I think, ends up at the 2. He's got losses to Yori Volk and Tanner Jordan, who Certain beat both of those guys. Spratley did avenge his loss to Jordan, but that's kind of something that I think comes from that. Yori Volk at the 5 might surprise some people, but he's got lost. He's got lost to Certain, and then he beat Spratley, but lost to Tanner Jordan. So just, I mean, it's 125. It's a crazy weight. You've got the returning Big 12 champ Steve O'Poolin at the 3. His 2 losses are to the 7 seed Jet Stricklenberger and then unseeded Eli Griffin. Kind of just a crazy, again, just a crazy season, just a weird weight. But that's kind of your top guys. I think that this is a weight that you could see 9, 10 different guys end up getting those qualifying spots. This weight has 6 automatic qualifiers, so it's going to be a fight. It's going to be tough. There's so many matches that could go so many different ways. It's kind of hard to fully predict. Part of me wants to say that I do feel like I feel relatively confident in who would the top 4 guys that could make the finals. Personally, I think the finals will be some combination of Certain or Volk from the top half, or I mean, don't count out Eli Griffin; he's kind of a wild card. Or on the bottom side, Steve O'Poolin and Troy Spratley. If some combination of those 4 weren't in that finale or those finals, I would be a little surprised by that, if I'm being totally honest. So just kind of diving into some matches. I mentioned Eli Griffin as a guy that, as crazy as it sounds, could end up in the finals. Eli Griffin, he was having a really strong end of the year last year for California Baptist, ended up getting a pretty significant leg injury. This year he's had an up and down season and just kind of a weird year. Kind of started the year kind of rough. But when you look, especially he had a really great Midlands where he ends up crashing the finals, losing to Luke Stanich 8-7 in rideouts. So Stanich, obviously a breakout guy for Lehigh. But he's got close loss to Kaiser Terrakina. He beat Steve O'Poolin. He lost to Tanner Jordan. He lost to Trevor Anderson. But he's one of those guys that I think could really get hot. And that Eli Griffin Trevor Anderson match is a first round match. Eli Griffin was leading for most of that one. Anderson there's this position he's really good at. He did the same thing to Kaiser Terrakina. Just kind of when guys, I want to say off a high crotch, he just kind of takes them to their back and he looks so strong from there. So that's a match where Anderson obviously won in the head to head, but Griffin looked really good in that match. And any result from that would not shock me. Both those guys, I think, could go on a run. Anderson's super tough, too, as a redshirt freshman for Northern Iowa. He's been right there in a lot of matches. It's a really tough first-round match for both guys. And the winner or the loser could end up finishing in that top 6. Likely going to see a Yori Volk versus Tanner Jordan rematch in the quarters. Tanner Jordan beat Volk with a late reversal in the duel this year. Really great match. Jordan's got some funky stuff on bottom. He and Certain had a really good match where I think Jordan got at least 2 reversals. Really good on bottom, kind of a unique skill. Volk, obviously, junior world champ, I think has gotten some really big wins, but kind of hasn't had that consistency that you're looking for, but who has this weight. So again, Volk is a guy that if he were to come out a champ, would not be shocked at all. You got returning Big 12 champ Steve O'Poolin at the 3. Uh, Probably going to see him in the quarters. That Conrad Hendrickson and Kyson Terrakina match, I think, is a little juicier than some people think. Hendrickson's a guy that was not expected to really make the lineup for OU. Gray shirted while at Chattanooga, and then he transferred in. He's had a kind of up and down year, but I mean, he's got really solid wins. Let me make sure before I just say stuff here. He's got some one-sided losses, but he beat Jet Strickenberger, who I think highly of. He's had a one takedown match with guys like Troy Spratley, Richie Figueroa. There's another one. Tyson Terrakina was an overtime match, a 7-6 win over Trevor Anderson. Hendrickson has a unique build that I think when his defense is on and he wrestles positionally really well, he's hard to score on. Terrakina, a guy that's kind of struggled to be super consistent and will have these flashes of a high level guy. Iowa State's really going to need him to ideally at least wrestle the seed and qualify to get all 10 guys. He's right there at the border. It's a tough first round matchup. They've wrestled before. It's going to be really interesting to see who comes out on top of that one. Jet Strickenberger versus Tucker Owens. They had a match earlier this year. I want to say Strickenberger won 10-8 or something along those lines. Strickenberger, for those who don't know, he was a junior college champ at 125 pounds, transferred to West Virginia. He started his year kind of hot, getting a win over Brandon Kaler at, I want to say, the Southeast Open. And then he's also got that win over Steve O'Poolin. He's a guy that I think he's big for the weight. He's pretty long, or at least he looks very long. There's no doubt about it. So he went up to 33 for a match. Then we didn't see him for a little bit. Well, I think he was making that descent back down. Wrestled in their last duel. So I think Strickenberger is a guy. That first round matchup is really tough. With having wrestled before and it being your first match. But I think if Strickenberger can navigate that match and come out, then a match with him and Troy Spratley, one we haven't seen this year, could be really interesting. Spratley's looked great coming off a loss to Drake Ayala, but he got that win over Certain. He's a guy that I think Oklahoma State's really looking to potentially win. But that Strickenberger match could get a little tricky just with his style and where he's good. I think that's a really exciting match. And then, so like I said, I'm going to give some general stuff, maybe dive into some potential matches we might see. But the written previews, they'll have like the semifinals, the finals, things like that. I don't want to do a whole, here's what I think we'll finish 1 through 8 kind of deal. This is a little more general. So moving on to 133. Dayton Fix at the 1, undefeated against Big 12 competition, 4-time Big 12 champ, looking to be the first ever 5-timer. David Carr could join him in that group. Fix is pretty far and away the 1 and the favorite to win. Evan Frost at the 2. Fix majored him 11-3 this year. So, I mean, Dayton has just been dominant in the Big 12. It's kind of crazy that in every year Dayton's wrestled, he's been the only Big 12 AA at 133 pounds. There have been guys kind of seated around there, but Fix is just so good. He's he's the favorite by far. So kind of expecting him to run to the finals. But there's some interesting guys in other places in this lineup or bracket. So I'm expecting Julian Farber versus Derek Cardinal quarterfinals. I think Farber at the 5 is really interesting. I mean, he's got a win over Nick Bouzakis. I think he can wrestle at a really high level. We've seen him do some really good stuff this year. He did lose a decision to Derek Cardinal earlier this season, so that's going to be a big rematch, and one for Northern Iowa especially. That South Dakota State match was really early in the year at the Daktronics Open. Since then, like I said, we've seen him beat Nick Bouzakis, Gable Strickland. There was another big one. I think those are the 2 biggest ones. So that's definitely one to look out for, especially once you get into that team race. I think those are 2 teams that are going to be kind of battling for that 4th, 5th spot and could very well challenge for 3rd. Dom Serrano at the 3 seeds, it really interesting to me. He's 20-3. Northern Colorado, they haven't seen a lot of the top schools in the Big 12. So, but that does not mean that Serrano is not experienced. I mean, he's beaten Derek Cardinal, he's beaten Hunter Leak, two solid guys there. He's beaten Nasir Bailey, um, made the scuffle finals. So that that record's awesome. Undefeated in conference. I just don't know where he lines up with a guy like an Evan Frost or Dayton Fix. Um, and even before that, Cade Moore at the 6th seed is very intriguing. So uh, Moore, kind of a late entry into the lineup for the Tigers, ends up going out and pinning Sam Latona. Very exciting match in the duel, and then has a crazy match with Vito Arujau, where Moore had I want to say a 7-2, 7-3 lead, and Vito ends up just doing Vito things, world champ things, getting some takedowns late and to win 10-9. I know that the coaching staff is super excited about Moore. They're so high on him. He's got a really fun style. He's got a unique feel. The stuff he does sometimes, he hasn't seen that many ranked guys outside of Vito and Latona, but in the matches against unranked guys either. I mean, he's just doing just crazy stuff that you don't see too often. So he's one to watch. I think a match with him and Serrano is super interesting if you're looking for a sleeper at this weight. Hunter Leak at the 7th seed. Him and Eli Griffin are probably the two best chances for California Baptist to get their first qualifier. Leak has been right there with some big guys. He had like a 1-point match with Ragusin this year. He hasn't fully seemed to get that next level type of win. But he's a guy that, I mean, just right there in that border. There's 6 qualifiers here as well. 6 qualifiers here. So would love to see California Baptist get multiple guys or even just one guy. And then Evan Frost at that 2 seed, kind of expecting him to make it to the semis. I like Leak, but I think that's a tough matchup for him. And then Frost versus Serrano, or if Cade Moore can make a run, I think is really exciting. But at the end of the day, finals wise, you're taking Dayton Fix to stay undefeated against Big 12 wrestlers and get that 5th Big 12 title, which could end up giving them the 1 seed depending on how EIWAs go. 141 pounds. So this is one of those weights where it feels like there's at least 1 to 2 missing qualifying spots. There's 5 automatic qualifiers, and the top 4 guys are all in the top 12. And then you've got Clay Carlson and Josh Edmond at that 5 and 6 spot. That's going to be so tough. And you've got 9 ranked wrestlers in the weight. There's going to be a number of guys left home that'll be kind of tough to watch. Anthony Echemendia gets the top seed. He lost to Tegan Jameson, but he beat Cale Happel. Cale Happel beat Tegan Jameson. Josh Edmond beat Cale Happel. It's kind of a mess at that top 3 area. But we'll dive into their Echemendia 1 seed, expecting to see him versus Cole Brooks. Cole Brooks, true freshman for Wyoming. Really young lineup for the Wyoming Cowboys, but Brooks has been really solid this year. I think had some injuries mid-season, but has looked really good lately. Echemendia has been so explosive, though, that I really like him in that match, and he's a little more veteran guy, so that's going to be a tough matchup for a true freshman there. Clay Carlson at the 5 seed is so interesting to me. Last year, we saw him kind of have a rough first semester and then come back and end up finishing as an All-American. He did not start wrestling until the second semester this year. Again, kind of had a rough start. I think he made his debut at the Soldier Salute, lost to Zeke Seltzer, Vance Vombauer. So it's kind of like, oh man, Clay Carlson, he's a veteran, kind of what's his health and things like that. He's looked better lately. He had an overtime match with Tegan Jameson where, I mean, it looked like he had it, and Jameson's up battling back to come back for that win. But we've seen Carlson get a win over Gavin Drexler. That's probably one of his better wins this year. Drexler, one of those guys that's not seeded but is in the rankings. And then Jordan Titus at the 4. Titus has had a great year. His only losses are to Cale Happel and Tegan Jameson. He's got a very fun style to watch. He's got some unique offense. A lot of these West Virginia guys, I feel like Titus and Waters both have good Jonesy tilts, which you don't see too often. in college these days, but I've seen both of them go for it and hit it multiple times. If you want to see a crazy low scoring match, Jordan Titus versus Josh Edmond in the duel this year. I mean, Titus has just a ridiculous standing Ramby and is able to avoid giving up points. He dominated at the Midlands. He looked really good. A match between him and Carlson is huge. You know, like I talked highly about Echmendia, but if one of those guys gets hot, I mean, that could be really exciting, especially the matchup Carlson and Titus. They're very differing styles. I would say Carlson's a little more not defensive, but just very stout and very strong position. Titus just has a lot of different attacks from unique areas, and it's tough to score on. So that's going to be an interesting match. Cale Happel at the 3 seed. So he was the 3 seed last year. He's likely to match up with Josh Edmond in the quarters. Josh Edmond, another 6 seed like Cade Moore. He actually beat Cale Happel 4-3 just recently in the duel. It was close. Edmond had to pull out some crazy hips to not give up a late score. But Josh Edmond at the 6 seed, I think is interesting. He's got either 1 point or overtime matches with Echmendia, Jordan Titus. Let me restart. So he had a 10-9 match with Anthony Echmendia just recently. He had a 2-1 ride out match with Jordan Titus. He had a 4-3 win over Cale Happel. I think those are the big guys in the conference that he's seen. So Josh Edmond's one of those guys that feels like he's right there for Missouri to just kind of break through. Will he be able to repeat that win over Happel in a tournament setting? I'm not sure. Happel's really tough. I will say last year, kind of just ironically or not, Happel was the 3 seed and took on a 6 seed Allen Hart of Missouri and ended up dropping that match. But Happel's a guy, it seems like every year he's really, really improved. So I think that I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him make a run. Past there, you got the 7 seed Hayden Drury taking on unseeded but ranked Gavin Drexler. That's, again, it's going to be a big match between two teams that are going to be lower in the team standings, and that's going to be an important match to try to push someone through, potentially get an at-large. Drury made a midseason change. He moved up from 133 to 141. I think it took a little bit for him to kind of acclimate to the weight, but he's got to win over Cole Brooks. He beat Gavin Drexler already this season. I don't know that he can go with those top guys, but he's definitely a guy that I think Utah Valley is looking to get multiple qualifiers, and he'd be one of them. Taking Jameson, the 2 seed, kind of expecting to see him make it to the semis, potentially setting up a rematch with Cale Happel, which is a match that he lost, which is a tough run, and just kind of see what happens from there. I mean, those top 3 guys have all wrestled. There's a lot of landmines. That 5 spot for that automatic qualifier is going to be so tough. Like I said, this is just one of those weights where you've got this top 4 there in the top 12, but then to have a 2-time All-American Clay Carlson at the 5, and then a guy like Josh Edmond who has a win over a big win over one of these guys and has been right there in so many matches at the 6. It's just like, man, for one of those guys to end up not making it with an automatic qualifying spot, if seeds hold, is tough. So I would not be shocked at all to see kind of similar to 125, a combination of different results of this for the podium here. Moving on to 149. So you got Casey Swiderski at the top seed. He is undefeated in the conference, beaten pretty much. He actually only has 3 conference wins: Ty Waters, Willie McDougall, and Gabe Willichell. But those are 3 pretty good wins there. Then you've got Willie McDougall at the 2 seed. Kind of surprised by that one. Willie McDougall, he lost to Logan Joffrey this year. He lost to Casey Swiderski, so the Swiderski loss is fine. But I think what really jumped him in the rankings is he had a win over Ty Waters and then 2 wins over Jordan Williams. In the conference, his record's pretty solid. He's taken some weird losses in out of conference, but I mean, it's conference tournament. Conference results are going to matter, and he's showed up when he's needed to. So McDougal sitting at that 2 seed is interesting. He is a returning Big 12 finalist from 2022. He redshirted last year, so he wasn't in the lineup. So he's obviously been there before. He's someone that can do it. You got Ty Waters at the 3, one of the best true freshmen this season. Waters, he's got wins over Joffrey, Benji Alanis, Joe Furnow. Lost in overtime to Casey Swiderski. A lot of his really, really good results are from out of conference guys. He had a really good Midlands. He's a tough guy. Another very long, lanky wrestler. He talked about Titus kind of having a unique style in some positions. Waters is no different. He's not afraid to go for it. Seems like he's one of those guys that can find a cradle from anywhere. So he's super fun to watch. And then Alec Martin at that 5 seat, or Jordan Williams at the 4. Top 10 recruit coming out of high school, didn't have a great redshirt year, was kind of back and forth with Sammy Alvarez this season, but has kind of turned it on as of lately. He's looked pretty good. Can't get through McDougal. Those are his only conference losses, but he beat Alec Martin. He pinned him. Decision over Gabe Wilchill in a crazy, very weird match. Williams is a guy who, when he's on, he has some very exciting stuff. They called him the Iceman in high school for his ability to just win these big matches. We haven't really seen him in big tournaments, so I think this would be, well, that's not true. He literally was at CKLV, but CKLV was not so great. So now that he's got a little more momentum and a little positive results lately. I don't know if he beat Swiderski, but I would not be surprised to see him finishing above his seed. Alec Martin at the 5, kind of talked about him a little bit. He's beaten a number of guys: Maxwell Peterson, Gabe Wilchell, Dane Morton. And then then Maxwell Peterson at the 6. Kellen March was the starter, but actually got injured in a match against him. Peterson kind of took that spot. And was in the rankings. He's back in the rankings. He's kind of been in and out of the back half of the rankings, has some ranked wins. Tough wrestler. Really curious to see how he'll do in a tournament setting. He's a redshirt freshman, so this is a big opportunity again for North Dakota State. 6 automatic qualifying spots, so he's right there on that border. But that would be a big win for them. Gabe Wilchell at the 7 for Wyoming. Long, lanky guy. He's got some interesting moves here at times. He can put himself in some interesting positions with that length, but he's got some dangerous things to him as well. He's got some, he hasn't beaten any of the seeded guys, but he's definitely one that, he's qualified before while he was at Edinburgh, so he's experienced right there in that bubble. Like him for Wyoming at that weight. Logan Joffrey for Missouri. He's an interesting one. If you look at his conference record, like I said, his best win is Willie McDougald in overtime earlier this season, and then he's only got one other win over Joe Furnow, Air Force. His 5-5 record doesn't look great, but when you dive into it, he lost to Chance Lamer in November, and then he lost to Kyle Parko, and then he lost in overtime to Cannon Webster, lost 6-4 to Caleb Henson, and lost 6-1 to Ty Waters in a match where he got hurt. So his 5 losses are to all his 5 losses are to, I think Lamer's outside of the top 8 right now, but top 10, top 12 type of guys. Webster is redshirting, but I think if he were starting, he'd probably be right around there. And then when you look at his wins, he's got the win over Willie McDougald in one of his last matches. He beat Jaden Abbas 8-1. An Abbas guy that's not necessarily always consistent, but pretty solid win. Joffrey's got really good scrambling. He's tough. He had a rib injury against Ty Waters that's kept him off the mat since January 26th. It's always going to be a factor when you're missing time that long, kind of similar to Cade Moore. I think a match with Swiderski is really tough, but Joffrey's a guy that's on the backside. If he's healthy, then I think at that 8 seed is kind of a tough matchup for a lot of these guys. And for Missouri, if they want to get into that top 2, try to win their 13th consecutive conference title, then they're going to need him definitely to wrestle above his seed. So I know I'm mentioning some Missouri guys as sleepers. That's 3 in a row. I promise there's reasons for it. They've got the records. They've got the resumes. I don't want to just seem like I'm shouting them out for anything. Let's see here, 157. So we got top seed Vinny Zerbin. He's undefeated this season, but again, kind of similar to Dom Serrano, has not seen any of the top guys this year. His best win is probably over Jared Hill, a 4-3 decision. And he gets a tough matchup right out of the gate with true freshman Sloan Swan for Wyoming. Swan is a guy that I think wasn't in the lineup to start the year, but kind of came on later in the year and has had some pretty solid results. Nothing too crazy. I don't know that's necessarily a match to that. I would be surprised by an upset there, but I do think it's kind of a tough match for your first one out of the gate. And then I mentioned Zerbin and Hill was a 4-3 decision at Southern Scuffle. It's going to be a rematch in the quarterfinals. It's a really tough match. Hill's looked good lately. Better, I'll say. He kind of had a rough start to the year. That's when I think for Oklahoma, they're really circling for something to happen here. Going to the next kind of bracket area, you got Brockmuller at the 5. Had a weird year. A lot of these Missouri guys just having weird years, especially late in the year. Mahler, he had recently beat Cale Swenson in a 4-1 decision, lost to Teague Traviso, and I think that took a hit for him in the rankings. And he'll get Caleb Dowling, a guy who he wrestled, I believe, earlier this year against. No, that was Alex Hornfeck. So West Virginia kind of going back and forth between those guys, but Caleb Dowling's very solid. That you can see that record 21-6. Not an easy first round matchup for a guy that has not been able to really find his offense as much lately. Cody Chittum at the 4, probably looking at a match between him and Mahler in that quarter. And Zerbin's undefeated; he's earned it. But I kind of think that is a matchup that either Missouri or Iowa State are kind of hoping to have if they can get through very tough quarters, because we just haven't really seen Zerbin tested too much. Even looking at his out of conference record, I believe his best win is over Daniel Cardenas, overtime 8-5. Cardenas obviously very solid this year, but I don't know that it's necessarily the type of win that makes you think that Zerbin is an easy next topic type of guy. So that Mahler Chittum matchup that could potentially happen in the quarters is going to be a big one, especially when you factor in that team race. Teague Travis sitting at that 3 seed, probably going to see a matchup with Cale Swenson of South Dakota State. They had, I believe, an overtime decision in the duel, 4-1. Travis scoring that the only takedown. Swenson's very solid. I would not be shocked to see a kind of similar situation. Travis has kind of not been as on his offense lately after having a hot start. Getting a little bit of a break, maybe he resets there, but Travis super tough, kind of broke onto the scene after bumping up from 149. I was one of the guys, I was trying to hype him up in the preseason too, and it took a little while to get him to 157, but it's cool to see him having success there. That match with Travis and Swenson in the quarters could be a toss-up and a big one, Oklahoma State and South Dakota State for those schools. Landon Johnson at the 7. He is a lot of North Dakota State, one of their younger guys. He's a redshirt freshman, 11-10 on the year. Has struggled against kind of the top guys, but he did beat Jared Hill, and I think that's kind of a big one that bumped him up. And then Ryder Downey at the 2. I was kind of pro Ryder Downey getting that 1 seed just because he's also undefeated in the conference, and he's got wins over Chittum, Teague Travis, Jared Hill. So I know he's taking some out of conference losses, but I would think that would still get him the 1. But either way, I like his path to the semis, and then he may have to navigate a match with Teague Travis, which in their duel was a 4-1 win for Downey. So again, a lot of these guys at 157 right there with each other, going to be nip and tuck. A lot of team race implications in this one. I think you could see a number of guys in those finals. Just gonna have to kind of see how this one plays out. 165 pounds. You got 1 seed Keegan O'Toole, 2 seed David Carr as expected. I think you could have flipped those with O'Toole missing that Iowa State duel and Northern Iowa duel. But the they're going to go with what they're going with, I suppose. They have pretty similar resumes as far as in the conference. They both have a win over Peyton Hall. They both beat Isaac Olenek. Keegan does have a win over Gianno Petruccelli and Cale Carlson, but Carr also, he's got a tech in over Jack Thompson and a pin over Jackson Guru. So, I mean, you're talking separated by inches, centimeters in between those two guys. Definitely looking for them to meet up in the finals. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say at all. 2 seed or 3 seed Peyton Hall obviously had that really tight match with Keegan O'Toole. But with him being the 3 seed, he'll match up with David Carr, which I think was a tougher match for him to navigate. So I think that he's in a great spot to wrestle the seed, though. Last year, he kind of had some issues with health. I think a lot of people kind of forgot how good Peyton Hall could be. Started the year with some inconsistent results, too, but has really turned it on lately. And as the 3 seed, he could potentially match up on the backside with Isaac Olenek, the 4 seed. I like Olenek to also meet in the semis. Kind of expecting this one to go a little scratch in those top 4. We saw this match already this year in the duel. O'Toole kind of not dominated, but it was pretty one-sided, 5-1, I think. 5-1 decision for O'Toole in that one. Olenek obviously has had a great year. He had a really great CKLV, really turned a corner. Has had taken some losses here recently, but I mean, he has definitely improved a lot since coming to Oklahoma State. I think if you get him back wrestling for more what we saw earlier in the year, then I wouldn't rule out that a match with O'Toole being something to look out for. Air Force with Gianno Petruccelli at that 5 seed. Petruccelli, he's lost to Olenek, Hall, and O'Toole, but he's beaten pretty much all the other guys. He hasn't wrestled Cale Carlson, but he did beat Tanner Cook, Cooper Voorhees, Brendan House, Derek Matthews. So pretty solid 5 seed there. That 6 seed Cale Carlson, he is a guy that I think you could look out for. His losses are to Olenek, Hall, and O'Toole. Again, another OU guy that's kind of had some hit and miss out of conference results. But I think when he's on, he can wrestle really well and potentially wrestle above seed to a point. So that could be one for OU to look out for. Tanner Cook at the 7 seed. I feel like if you watch wrestling closely, then you're probably pretty familiar with Tanner Cook and his elevator, Gator Bacon. I mean, I feel like I've counted his falls so many times. I want to say he has over 20 past 2-ish years. Super dangerous. Kind of struggling with injuries the past 2 years, so hasn't, unfortunately, I think, wrestled to what he could if he were fully healthy, which is such a bummer because we've seen it historically that he is like a very high-level guy. But him at the 7 seed, always dangerous. I don't know if that's how much that danger helps him against a guy like Carr, but on the backside, if Cook were to take out someone that really unexpected, that I wouldn't be shocked. Cook could be a really important factor for South Dakota State to kind of break into that top 4 there. And then you got Cooper Voorhees for Wyoming. Voorhees, I think that he was started this year at 157. Yeah, he's been 165 just since January. So not really sure where he'll end up being at, but this weight, I should probably cover that. 157 had 6 automatic qualifying spots, and so does 165. I feel like that's probably pretty appropriate for both those weights. You can maybe argue guys earn these, so you can't really argue for them. But for 157, it does feel like one more with that Jared Hill sitting kind of on the outside, but I think has some upside. But 165, I think 6 is probably right about that right amount there. 174 pounds, another interesting weight. You got Kate DeVos at the 1 seed. He's been just having an excellent year. Really just a big part of South Dakota State having such a great season, undefeated in the conference. He's beaten the other top guys, MJ Guyton, Peyton Mako, Braden Thompson, Gavin Sachs, Tate Piccolo. So easy 1 seed right there. Brody Conley at the 8 seed is kind of interesting. He's kind of been in and out of the lineup at times, but he was a pretty solid recruit coming out of high school. Redshirted last year with a good record. He was one of the guys that I put to watch early this season. In conference, he hasn't hit. So he got lost a 5-4 decision to Jared Sima, where he was leading until literally like the last second. Sima got a takedown. And then Gaitan just kind of did Gaitan things and got him in a headlock in a kind of scramble position and pinned him in like the first period, I want to say. So Conley is a guy at that 8 seed. I think DeVos is a tough matchup, but again, you get into that backside, you get guys who are having some difficulty or just not wrestling their tournament. Conley's a tough matchup to get from there. Moving on down, Jared Sim at the 5. He's a really interesting wrestler. I think not super expected to start for Northern Iowa at the start of the season necessarily, or at least not have the impact he has. But he pinned Tate Piccolo. Again, he got that win over Brody Conley. He had a really close match with Braden Thompson. He's a really good scrambler. He's fun to watch. I think that a potential likely quarterfinals matchup with him and Peyton Mako is really exciting. Mako at that 4 seed, returning Big 12, 2-time Big 12 finalist. Missed the last couple duels as well, but Mako is just a crazy scrambler, is not afraid to go in any position. This is a match where, a guy could get put on his back. I would not be shocked to see a pin. It's a really exciting matchup on paper. I think Mako has a little more experience and a little more savvy there. But so you could be looking at a K DeVos, Peyton Mako matchup in that semis match. Coming into this season, Mako was 3-1 against DeVos, but DeVos just beat him 5-0 in the duel. Those two have a long history. They've matched up at the scuffle. Last year, Mako actually beat DeVos in the blood round, which, that's always going to be crazy. So DeVos won, like I said, 5-0, but it was closer than the score might kind of tell you at first. So that's an interesting match to watch there. And then moving to the bottom half of the bracket, you got MJ Gaitan sitting in that 2 seed with a bye. He could see Gavin Sachs at the 7 seed. And this weight, it's another one. You got 6 automatic qualifiers, but Gavin Sachs, I believe, is ranked right around the top 20. He's a guy that I've been high on for a while for North Dakota State. He's always wrestled tough, really long and lanky. He likes the scrambles. Has kind of been in and out of the lineup again at times for North Dakota State, but I think a guy that's really tough. I think Gaitan's scrambling is too much for him in there, but I do think that it could be a fun match that we haven't seen this season. And Sachs is a guy that on the backside, if you get him in some of the right matchups, he hasn't seen too many conference guys. He's wrestled Tate Piccolo 3 times. He pinned him in the last one, but lost by decision in major the other 2, and then he lost to K DeVos. So hasn't seen too many guys at this weight. So Sachs is a guy that I think could make some noise on the backside. Braden Thompson at the 3 seed, he gets a bye. And a likely match with Tate Piccolo at the 6 seed, which is super interesting. Piccolo was a guy that coming into the year I thought would be a really, really big factor for OU, but hasn't really putting it together lately or this season. Even to start the year, he got majored by Alex Kramer of Central Michigan in the duel. And then 2 days later at an open, he beats him 7-2 in the finals. That's kind of been his whole season. He got teched by Peyton Mako. He lost to Braden Thompson 9-0 in the first Bedlam, but just wrestled him again in the last Bedlam and beat him 5-2 in overtime. He had an 8-5 match with K DeVos. He is a guy who even last year I don't think was having this down of a year necessarily, but came on much stronger for Big 12s and NCAAs. So, if you get Piccolo, OU new coaching staff, but OU multiple years now has really turned it on at Big 12s. Piccolo could be a guy that kind of does that, especially with that rematch against Thompson. It's going to be interesting. I don't know how that match looks. Last time it felt like Thompson was getting the legs a lot, but just could not finish on Piccolo. Piccolo, I want to say, gets a cradle in overtime. Great match. That's a big quarters match for both guys, and a potential match with MJ Gaitan. So again, for Oklahoma State and Iowa State, you're really looking for a guy to make a run. That Thompson versus Gaitan, if they match up in the semis, that was an overtime match with Gaitan coming out on top. But obviously, right there, either school can get their guy in the finals. That's going to be big points. 184 pounds. You've got Parker Keckeisen as the 1 seed. He's undefeated this year. He's beaten pretty much everyone, it feels like. And then Dustin Plott at that 2 seed. He and Keckeisen had a match in the duel this year. Keckeisen comes out on top of the 12-6 win. I didn't think it was the best. I didn't think that it was the version of Keckeisen we've seen a lot this year. But I think there's a very valid question of, was Keckeisen having an off night, or does Dustin Plott just kind of do that to guys? Because we've seen guys just kind of really struggle to keep up with his hand fighting, with his pace and things like that. Plott moving up, 2-time Big 12 champ at 174 pounds. I was pretty on the fence about him at 184, but he has exceeded my expectations. He majored Will Feldkamp, almost teched him, majored Sam Wolf, teched Dennis Robin. He beat Clayton Whiting pretty handily. An interesting note. So Plott's the 2 seed, 3 seed Bennett Berge. They had an overtime match where Berge was up, I believe, 6-2 at one point, and Plott kind of had to battle back to get that one, and then got in overtime. But Berge, true redshirt freshman, he's beaten Hawks, Wolf, Ethan Duca, Giuseppe Hoos, guys like that. He looked really good in that match. You get that rematch in the semis. It's going to be one to watch. Colton Hawks at the 4 seed for Missouri, kind of a late change. Clayton Whiting was starting most of the year, but Colton Hawks last year, they kind of been back and forth. Whiting beat him in Missouri's tournament in November, the Tiger Style Invite, and Whiting's just kind of been the guy all season, but he's missed some time lately. Hawks has stepped in, had a 10-6 loss to Berge, where he gave up a big move but got some solid offense of his own, lost to Parker Keckeisen, but he gets that 4 seed because he got a big win over Will Feldkamp in the last duel of the year, 12-8, where Feldkamp was going big and Hawks kind of capitalized. Feldkamp beat him, I want to say, in the round of 16 last year. Hawks is a guy who I think could be kind of one of those, when the lights are on, just really puts it all together in March type of guy. But when you've got a guy like Will Feldkamp who has that big move capability, there is that quarterfinal again, Iowa State versus Missouri, huge for the team race. Can Hawks get that win again, or is Feldkamp kind of make the correct adjustments? And this is a weight where you have only 5 automatic qualifiers, so that matchup is going to be big for getting that spot, because you got a guy, Sam Wolf, at that 6 seed. Hasn't had the recent results that you're looking at, and doesn't necessarily have the big conference results, but CKLV really helped him a lot. He got a win over Gavin Hoffman. He beat Chris Foka. He beat Clayton Whiting in the duel. So, like I said, hasn't necessarily had all the conference results you'd expect. He got majored by Berge, majored by Dustin Plott, majored by Will Feldkamp, but he's kind of the guy where you might not want to see him on the backside if you're not 100%, or if you're not in the right mindset. And then you've got Dennis Robin at the 7 seed and Ethan Duca at the 8 seed. Both those guys have had some solid results. It's going to be really hard to break into that top 5, though. I mean, you've got the number 1, number 2 wrestler in the country at this weight, and then you've got returning All-American at the 5 seed with Will Feldkamp, a guy who made the round of 16, Colton Hawks, Berge, obviously multiple-time junior world medalist, and just really seeming to be putting it on strong after kind of having a slow start to the year. He had a slow start at the Patriot Open, took a loss to Brockdale Signor for NC State, and then lost to Lenny Pinto in the duel. But then he majors Jaden Bullock. He beats David Key. He majors Sam Wolf. And then that match with Plot, I think, really, really shows that he can go with these top guys. And again, that's a potential semis match. So this is a weight that is a little top heavy with those top two, potentially top three, but I think there's some really exciting matchups throughout. And for Iowa State, even if Feldkamp were to drop his quarters match, I mean, Feldkamp is a guy that could go on a tear on the backside, just pinning dudes left and right with his style. So that's just, there's so many things with the team race and the individual matchups that I feel like I'm all over the place at times, but there's just so many good things at all of these weights. I'm so excited for this tournament. 197, you got Tanner Sloan as a 1 seed. He's undefeated in the conference. He's beaten the top guys. Beat Buchanan 4-2, I want to say, in the duel this year. 4-1. He beat him 4-1 in the duel this year. Pinned Rocky Elam, was down 3-0 and throws a headlock and pins him. It was a great move. 3-0 decision over Luke Serber. Beat Evan Bachman and all those guys. Buchanan Sloan's an easy 1 seed, expecting to see him versus whoever wins between Broderson or Cooley. That's kind of I think an interesting match. Cooley beat Broderson earlier this year in the duel 10-4. Would be a little surprised to see Broderson flip that, but I mean, when you're at a place like Iowa State with the training partners, with the coaching staff, anything can happen, right? But kind of expecting to see Sloan run to the semis, where he'll take on probably either Wyatt Volker or Evan Bachman. Those guys have gone back and forth. Evan Bachman has beaten Wyatt Volker. Bachman, probably Utah Valley's most established guy. There's 6 automatic qualifier spots here, so him getting that 4 seed is really big. He's 16-5 this year. He's only lost to Tanner Sloan, Joey Novak in overtime. He lost to Trent Hidley. A John Crawford loss from Franklin Marshall at the Keystone Classic. That one's kind of surprising. But Bachman, he's really strong defensively, very tough to score on. He beat Wyatt Volker 4-2. But Volker's also very solid, and he's a young guy, kind of you've got a guy who's a 6-year senior in Bachman versus a redshirt freshman in Volker. Who's going to finish the year better, who's healthier, things like that. That'll be a really interesting match to watch, to see whoever wins sets themselves up with an automatic qualifying spot. So that's a big one. But still kind of thinking that Sloan has a really nice path to the finals there. Going to the bottom half of the bracket, you got Buchanan at the 2 seed. He'll take on either probably Luke Serber, who at the 7 seed. The 7 seed for Luke Serber is kind of crazy. I don't think many people would predict something like that. Serber has kind of struggled with injuries this season. Not kind of, he definitely has. Doesn't have a ton of matches. He's only 8-4 on the year. So, or 11-4 on the year. Looking at that, Serber obviously had a razor close match with Zach Glazier. He lost a close one to Tanner Sloan. We've seen him historically have these big wins. He's beaten Rocky Elam when Rocky Elam was ranked number 1. So I don't know that it's necessarily an easy, or him at the 7 seed is just brutal. I don't know how well he matches up with Buchanan, especially if he's not 100%. But you get a guy like Serber on the backside, kind of like Feldkamp. Serber, when he's on, he's got a 63% bonus rate this year. That could be big for Oklahoma State if he can get some upsets. Rocky Elam likely taking on Joey Novak in the other quarters. Elam the 3 seed, Novak the 6 seed. Novak, a true freshman for Wyoming, having a really great season. Awesome to see them having such talent with all these young guys. Novak had a really solid CKLV where he beat Luke Geog, he beat Evan Bachman, Jack Waymeyer. I think he's a guy that we've really seen grow. He and Rocky actually wrestled in a duel this year, where Rocky got the 5-3 win. So, I mean, right there, that's a big matchup. Um, I would say he Novak is, I don't know. I feel like anytime you have a young guy this late in the year taking on a guy like Rocky, who has not wrestled a ton this year, he's 9-2 on the year. Um, I think that there's just potential there, a match to look out for. Even so, just kind of looking how the bracket might fall. You see Novak and Serber on the backside. That is a great match between two guys fighting it for that qualifying spot. So if you're looking for a guy to kind of bracket bust here, then Novak or Serber are kind of the two big picks there. 285 pounds. Wyatt Hendrickson at the 1 seed. Kind of surprised they went with Hendrickson at the 1, especially because he is obviously undefeated, returning Big 12 champ. His best win this year is a major decision over Josh Heinzelman, the 4 seed, while Younger has beaten Zach Elam. He's beaten Josh Heinzelman. He's beaten Connor Doucette and Michael Wolfgram. Equal 20-0 records. I tend to lean towards Younger as being a little more established, but Hendrickson is the returning Big 12 champ. So I would be surprised to see anyone but Hendrickson coming out of that top half of the bracket. Kevin Zimmer sitting there at that 8 seed. He's 0-2 in the conference. I think he's done some solid stuff, but he's a redshirt freshman, probably a little on the smaller size for heavyweight, but Hendrickson is Hendrickson. That's a tough match. Then the other quarter is likely to see 4 seed Josh Heinzelman and 5 seed Connor Doucette. These guys have gone back and forth their entire careers, probably going back to high school. I'm sure that they wrestled. Even this year, Doucette won the first match in overtime at the first Bedlam, Doucette won the first match. Yes. Sorry. Connor Doucette won the first match in rideouts. The rematch in the second Bedlam, Josh Heinzelman got it. I want to say with a late reversal, 2-1 decision. Those guys are always going to be a toss-up. But again, when you're looking at team score for Oklahoma State, if they can Doucette is a guy that can keep it close with anyone. He's had such close matches with pretty much everyone in his career that he can, I definitely think finish higher than that 5 seed. Heinzelman having one of his best years, getting that 4 seed and getting pretty high up there in the rankings. He's the only losses he has is Younger Bastida, Wyatt Hendrickson, which again, those guys are both undefeated. The aforementioned Connor Doucette match, and then a 2-1 loss to Zach Elam. So Heinzelman very tough at that 4. But it's going to be kind of hard to break past that when you've got 3 seed Zach Elam sitting there. Zach has kind of had up and down, not results, but just offensive output, I'll say. I think when Zach's really on, he can really score a lot of points. But he's wrestled some tighter ones lately. He can also wrestle some close matches. He does have a 50% bonus rate this year. His only loss this year is to Younger Bastida. He's got wins over Tyrell Gordon, Connor Doucette, Michael Wolfgram. So he's a pretty solid 3 seed. You could see another matchup with Tyrell Gordon in the quarterfinals. That one was a rideout match where Elam got a turn in overtime to win 4-1. So obviously for Northern Iowa, that's a big opportunity there. With Gordon in that 6 seed, Gordon's been just progressively getting better and better. Finished in the round of 16 last year. Hasn't wrestled a ton this year, but again, another guy who I would not be shocked at all to see finish above 6. He's got overtime matches, overtime losses to Doucette, Heinzelman, and Zach Elam. So clearly just right there with some of the other top guys in the conference. Michael Wolfgram sitting at that 7 seed. He has just pretty much lost to the top guys. Top 5 seeds he has losses to, but that's about it. And then Younger Bastida at that 2 seed. I mean, you're looking at a likely Younger versus Hendrickson clash in the finals. Younger's just looked incredible. He's my pick to win. He's my pick to make the NCAA finals. Is just ridiculously one of the best bump ups to heavyweight that I've seen recently at least. Um, so yeah, I hopefully I didn't just ramble for almost an hour, and it was all relatively cohesive. Like I said, I really like to dive into some things that people might not necessarily first line think about when they're looking at these types of brackets and whatnot. I really try to highlight guys that I like um, to potentially surprise people. At heavyweight, I think didn't talk about Luke Rasmussen and Devin Dawson. Rasmussen for South Dakota State, uh, redshirt freshman, very long, maybe a little on the smaller size, but he's very, very solid. He was getting majored by Carnegie Set, but locked up a cradle for 7 points to make the match a lot closer. He's got some funky stuff. He's fun to watch. And then Devin Dawson, another junior college guy, all multiple time All American. Um, uh, I believe at Pratt Community College. He hasn't had the results, but he has these flashes and matches that really, really. Uh, I mean, if he can put together a full 7 minutes, then he's a guy that I'm like, man, he could take out someone that would be pretty surprising. I don't know that he'll necessarily, or I don't think he'll qualify. There's only 5 automatic qualifying spots. Another tough wait for the Big 12, where it feels like they're like one short with Tyrell Gordon at that 6th seed. But Dawson's very solid, and I think one to watch. He's got some exciting matches to him. But yeah, like I said, hopefully it was relatively coherent. Get some interesting tidbits or some matches to look out for, some guys to look out for. Team wise, I haven't sat down and gone through all the brackets and kind of what I expect. I think Iowa State is in a really good position with where they're at in brackets. I think Oklahoma State, some of their matches could be tough, but they've kind of been proving everyone wrong all season. So, who knows with them? And then Missouri, just really, really rough end of the season, injuries, illness, just not looking like a typical Missouri team at this point in the year. And so how do they respond? Just something to look out for. And then I think South Dakota State and teams like Northern Iowa are right there really battling to climb the rankings. Oklahoma too. They've always come on strong in the postseason. So, but yeah. So written previews will be a little more organized and a little more coherent, a little bigger focus on the placements and things like that, and who I think will actually win. But hopefully this was just a fun listen for some people. But that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for listening.